residential areas. The violence continues. Chrisitan Whiton is a former State Department senior advisor. Chrisian, good to see you. Claiming it's over maybe a little bit like, saying the rainstorm's over when you're getting pounded by hail. Is there any serious indication the revolt is over?
No, Greg, there's not, and this could have been foreseen. The deal was worked out with Kofi Annan, who you'll recall was the disgraced UN Secretary General, who oversaw one of the largest scandals in human history, the Oil for Food program. He's been a friend to dictators, either wittingly or unwittingly. Has a plan. The Syrians broke it before the ink was even dry on this. They've implemented absolutely none of the steps, and unfortunately, there's a cost to this because now the West, partly because of what they thought was a good faith agreement between the Syrian government and its opponents, the West has stopped what little support it was giving to the rebels, which was rhetorical support.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you a bit more about the plan by Kofi Annan. It does nothing to remove Bashir al-Assad. So does that mean, in essence, that the international community has failed the Syrian people?
Well, they certainly haven't done it a whole lot of favors, and this is, as we step back and realize we're in a new world, a new Middle East, the UN has never been terribly useful to U.S. interests or to the interests of our democratic allies, and I think, this is another case where the so-called international community and the UN, other multilateral organizations, is not particularly useful. You need nation states, people with principles, governments with principles to pay attention to political outcomes in these places around the world, but we're asleep at the wheel with Egypt as that glides into the hands of Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood. That's happening across all of the Middle East.
Yeah.
And now, you have the Obama approach of doing virtually nothing. You have the McCain approach of calling for a no-fly zone. It's this one-size-fits-all approach. There's a lot that we can be doing in the middle on Syria, but we're not.
This UN plan calls for an eventual democratic transition. Would Assad ever allow that, or is that just sort of a naive, if not feckless proposal?
I think judging from the track record of this government, and this is a government that's killed, estimates vary, but about 9,000 or so of its population, of its own people, are they really going to sit down in good faith, especially after the rebels lay down their arms, or, sort of come forward and follow through? It's just very unlikely, judging from their history.
Chrisian, I want to turn now to Iran. President Obama agreeing on Friday to tough new sanctions to slow Iran's oil exports, to cut them off, essentially, from other nations. Do you think that will deter Iran's suspected nuclear program, or is it clear that nothing short of force will stop them from weaponizing?
Yeah, it's been impossible so far to correlate any of the effects of sanctions, which are real in the sense that they have an economic impact on the Iranian people, with a decrease in nuclear activity related to the nuclear weapons program. If you look at what the IAEA continues to report, that program is full speed ahead. In fact, everyone outside of the Washington intelligence bureaucracy seems convinced that that's on track. So, the sanctions have been very gradualist. President Obama spent his first year in office, in his words, outstretching his hand to the Iranian regime. And now you've had sanctions that are tough but have gone on slowly. So We've made it very easy for the Iranian regime to adapt to these sanctions.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, as you know, in Saudi Arabia today, expressing doubt that Iran has any intention of negotiating a solution. But perhaps more important than that, she said, quote, "Our policy is one of prevention, not containment." You buy that? Do you think it's true? Because there are many U.S. senators on Capitol Hill that don't buy that.
Right. I don't buy that. But more importantly, the people who run Iran don't buy that. The people who run Syria don't buy that. The people who run North Korea don't buy that. This is as much shadowboxing from the Obama administration. They talk tough. That's part of an election strategy because they were taking a lot of heat for being soft on Israel or for not coming to the aid of Israel. But no, there's nothing, if you look at where our force is and what the intent of this administration has been, what its criteria for using force, which is frankly to use it only when U.S. interests are not at stake, and also the lecture they've given Israel on not defending its own interests, we are absolutely not going to intervene in Iran.
So to play this
Iranians
out,
know it.
To play this out, let's assume for a moment that President Obama wins re-election. There's a second term. Do you think that the president would then, if Israel doesn't act militarily, the president would acquiesce in allowing Iran to have nuclear weapons, then simply argue that we can contain them and deter them the same way we did the Soviets during the Cold War? Do you think he'd make a pivot like that so dramatic?
I think so, and there's even talk in Washington and establishment think tanks of, gee, we should start, planning for the eventuality that Iran is a nuclear power. The problem is the main first step of that is to say, okay, our allies are underneath the U.S. nuclear umbrella, but no one's going to believe that. And so you'll have countries like Saudi Arabia and others possibly pursuing their own nuclear arsenals, which just makes the region all that much more dangerous and increases odds that a nuke could make its way into the hands of terrorists.
And, of course, Israel is so tiny geographically, all it would take really is one nuclear detonation there. Chrisitan Whiton, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Patty Ann?
Well,